Hello friends! Welcome back, and today we're going to be talking about the Black Dahlia. This poor lady, she had a rough time in LA. Didn't make it, but she became more famous than her wildest dreams. Yeah, that's a Black Dahlia. Before I get too far into things, I want to point out my nails. Oh, I usually just do French tips, but I found some of these little blood tips. Don't they look like little vampire teeth? Oh, I love them. So yeah, I'm super excited to be back, and happy Monday. Oh yeah, warning. What the fuck does she say? Viewer discretion advised. There's gonna be some shit that you don't want to listen to, so you have to be mature to watch this. Back to the video. So the Black Dahlia is a famously unsolved case, but there are a couple suspects, and one of them I'd like to talk about today, but we'll get into that. She got a Facebook message. Elizabeth Short. She was born, and they kept on saying, I thought it was Medford, Massachusetts, but it sounded kind of nasally, so it might be Bedford. Either way. And she became sort of a wild child. She was like too big of a fish for the pond she was living in. And so she headed to LA. And this caused the most notorious case in LA history. I'm just gonna dive right in. January 15th, Elizabeth Short's body was found cut in half. Just severed her right in half. Oh my god. Makeup again. Son of a bitch. Okay. I've got my Tartelette palette. This is like Tartelette in Bloom. So the Black Dahlia. She had lacerations across her face. She was found with feces in her intestines. So like she was fed shit. And she had this weird geometric shape carved into her thigh, and she also was drained of all of her blood. So this was kind of a peculiar sight that these police officers came on into. I could have done a backstory, but last time I went way into the friggin' details, and I think we need to get to the murder. They found her body. It was in bad condition. She was cut in half, an inch above the belly button. I guess they had found the one place in her body that they don't need to cut through bone to separate. And so the person that had committed this crime was super friggin' skilled in surgery. And so there was just a bunch of little things that were left on her body that would indicate what kind of a person would do this. But I like to do cases that have something to do with me, because you know, I'm a human and I'm selfish. I like to think about myself and things that interest me. And so, crazy story, I was in LA and I loved Runyon Canyon. I would be there every single day. I'm switching from Sweetheart to Rebel. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go around this little palette thing here. So I'm gonna start here, boop, 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 boop. And then I'm gonna come back through and boop, boop. So, just in case I forget to show you what I'm doing, that's what I'm doing. So, when I went to LA, I love Runyon Canyon. I would go up there all the time. And there was this guy that was like there was like a fire truck going down the hill. And he was trying to wave them down and tell them that there was this woman that was up ahead and she needed assistance. And so they head off. But the guy that waved down the fire department came over and we started talking, chatting. And we walked down the hill together, and he ended up getting my number. So later on, he invited me to his place. Normally, this would be a big old red flag. But, you know, I had a gun. I brought it with me. I even pulled it on him just to make sure he knows I'm that type of a person. So he takes me back to his place later on, and it turns out the place that he's living at, his landlord told him that is the exact apartment that the Black Dahlia lived in with 7 other women in the time period that she died. It was 1842 Cherokee Avenue, and it was called the Chancellor's Apartments. You can look it up, room 501, because I took some pictures while I was up there, of course. in the Black Dahlia's apartment because I fucking love true crime, and I was like, you're shitting me. I'm in the Black Dahlia's apartment right now. I got to go up on the roof. I got to see LA from the Black Dahlia's point of view. Anyways, very cool little connection. There's some random connections that I have to a bunch of cases that I'm going to do, and I can't wait. Oh my god, I just have some new developments on some of my McLeod crimes that I'd like to cover. But anyway, so they have a body, and now we just have so many different people calling in saying, I am the Black Dahlia killer. It was me. And they were getting tired of this, getting calls all the time. But there was this one person in particular, oh no, George Hodel. He was the main suspect. So his son, Steve Hodel, he is a retired LAPD officer, and he was part of the homicide division. And so he had retired. He moved up to Bellingham, and his father died out of the blue. His stepmom called June, and she said, George is dead. He died. So George, he's a suspect. And apparently that doesn't go very far for a number of reasons. One, because he left the country. And two, they just wanted to close that shit right up because there was a cover-up within the department. Okay, so June, one of George's lovers, they were together for 20 years, and she called Steve and said, your father's dead. And so Steve has to come by and do the thing where he takes care of his final arrangements. That's a lot of pigment. Oh, that was a move. Whoa. I guess I'm gonna have to do that to the other side. And so Steve goes and collects some of his father's belongings. June thinks that he should have this little photo album that had some pictures of him and his mother, you know, the family. And while he's flipping through these photos, he sees this woman that's strikingly familiar. She has dark black hair, she's nude, and she just has these facial features that are very familiar to him. And he thinks, like, Black Dahlia. He remembers seeing a film with Lucy Arnaz. Fucking love her. I love Lucy. Watched all of her shows. But she plays the Black Dahlia back in this old movie. Forget what it's called. So he recognized her in this photo from that movie. And so he launches this full-ass investigation because he just runs into some weird evidence. And so for a number of reasons, he moves to LA because he's up in Bellingham. He can't really investigate this from far away. So he moves there and he starts this full-ass investigation on his father. And so to begin that, you kind of need to know more about George. And so George Hodel, he was born to two Russian immigrants. His parents had met in Paris. His father had escaped the army. He was going to be drafted in the army, but I guess Jewish people are treated very poorly, like slaves in the army. And so he got on a train and he said that his grandmother was ill. And so he got out of that shit and then met Esther, this woman that was a Jewish dentist in Paris. And it's just like, that's just very unheard of in that time. So yeah, they meet, they fall in love, they move to LA, they have George, and George is this friggin' musical prodigy. He's playing concerts at age 9, and he's above professional musicians at this point. And they also find out that he is quite sexually precocious. And so at this time, he had graduated super friggin' early, and he went to Caltech, a very prestigious school, and he's only there for a year, and he starts this whole affair with the professor's wife. Pretty crazy. At 14. Oh my god. To be like sexually competent enough to like be attractive to a professor's wife. And so that produces a child. And she gets the fuck out of there. She goes to the East Coast. George follows her. George, he says, I would love to marry you. That'd be good. You know, we can raise this child together. And she says, dude, you ruined my fucking life. Get away from me. Go home, George. Go home. And so he does. And he goes back to Caltech. Gets kicked out for the controversy. And then he becomes a yellow cab driver in the city. And so George does this for a little while. And then he goes to school in San Francisco. And he does pre-med. And then he goes across the bay, finishes his school. He becomes the head of the VD, the venereal disease department. And so he becomes a prominent doctor and is well respected in his community. And while in med school, he helps his professors in surgery. And he, I guess, was a super intelligent man. He scored a 186 on his IQ test. That's a point higher than Einstein, so he's real smart like. And he figures a way to become a doctor. And yeah, he's kind of living the life. He's got a bunch of different chicks in his life. Him and his friend, I think it's John Huston. In his younger years, he makes friends with the son of a famous actor, and later he becomes a famous director. And so John and him, they double date these two girls, Dorothy and Emilia. And so first, John and Emilia are together, and then they switch because Dorothy falls in love with John. They run off. They're married for 7 years, and so George and Emilia are a couple now because they're like, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. And so they have a child, and I don't know, doesn't last super long because he goes through a bunch of ladies. There was another lady that comes in, has an affair with him. They have a child, Tamar. Note this for later. And then Dorothy, she comes back in the picture. She divorces John. And Dorothy gives, I think, 3 boys to George. And Steve is one of them, the one that's the LAPD detective that's doing all of this work for this case. And so George and Dorothy, they settle down in LA. And they have this giant Mayan mansion made by Lloyd Wright. He's a famous architect in LA. And so basically this house that they live in, it's made out of concrete, made into like a Mayan temple looking beautiful friggin' thing. But yeah, so George starts throwing all sorts of parties and stuff with his friends in this Mayan temple. And at this time, he has his daughter come and visit. And some disgusting shit goes down. So I guess George, he gets a knock at the door, and it's the police, and he is to be arrested for incest. So what had happened at these parties, I guess he had sexual relations with his daughter with 3 other people in the room, and so he's getting arrested. And so I guess before this, the police had bugged his house. And around this time, he was sent to court. And so basically, he had hired the best attorney possible. And this attorney gets him out of trouble, like big time. Took him 45 minutes to say not guilty. Couldn't believe that. Now, he's trying to say that Tamar is a pathological liar, and so he wins, but his reputation is ruined. And so he moves away, and he meets another woman, June. And so Steve comes around and starts looking into his dad's past, and here he finds out that his father, George, was the main suspect to the Dahlia murder. pretty freaking crazy. So Tamar had been arrested, and when she was arrested, they told her about her father and the implications. Yeah. George is being investigated for murder of the Black Dahlia for a number of different reasons. And so Steve is uncovering all of this information about him, and it's just starting to pile up, the evidence against him, and not only for the Black Dahlia murders, but for 9 other murders. There were a couple others that actually Elizabeth Short had went to go and investigate because I guess she was interested in the red lipstick murders. There were 3 of them, 2 young ladies and 1 child. Sad. And she had come back to LA and she was in fear for her life. So George, his house had been bugged for the first trial. And so when he's implicated for the murder of the Black Dahlia, they had been already keeping surveillance around his house. And day 3 of the surveillance, a murder occurs under their watch. They're like 4 minutes away. They don't do anything. There's a woman that's crying, and she's trying to call the police. Doesn't work. Tries to call the police again. Doesn't work. A couple hours later, there was a sound of a pipe hitting the wall, some screams from a woman, pipe hitting a wall again, and then silence. And the police officers didn't do anything. They were listening in, and she was not helped. And so for that reason, they stopped alongside of George leaving the country. They thought it's probably best that we just put this behind us. But that's the reason why they stopped investigating George. This fucking guy. I have to do that weird face. To do that part. Okay. So, a couple of things that had tied George to this Black Dahlia murder was that he had purchased these concrete bags to do some restoration in his big-ass Mayan temple mansion. And so I guess these bags that he had used were... Oh, this looks kind of blue to me. Fuck. Okay, I'm gonna do my sparkles first. So George had purchased these bags only a couple days, I think the 8th of January, which was only, what, the 15th she was found in that lot by the woman. And so they said that these bags that held cement, concrete, were used to transport the segments of her body. And not only that, but the shit that they had found shoved down her little throat had some weird green substance that was not identified. And so later on, Steve had found out that his dad had purchased some Fertilite, and it had this weird green substance in it. And so they didn't make the connection at the time, but now that seems like if she had been tested for that, that would have been really interesting to see. And so along with that, George, he was friends with this guy named Manta Ray. I don't know. Couldn't really figure that out, but he was a surrealist artist that would be super misogynistic. He would paint like women with a rope around their neck being pulled, just stupid shit like that. And he basically painted out the Black Dahlia, but George supposedly committed what the inspiration was that his friend had created. And so on one of these pieces of art, there was this weird geometric shape on one of the ladies' faces. And that exact shape was carved into the Black Dahlia's hip. And so that was kind of odd. Just weird little things like that. And there's just the fact that the Black Dahlia was taken apart in such a professional manner. They said that it had to have been done by a surgeon, because to have figured out that the only place that you can carve into a body and split it in half without going through bone is through this one vertebrae in the back. I love this part with the sparkles. With the sparkly sparkles. This is where it turns into magic. So Steve's finding all this weird shit. His dad's connected some way, implicated in this murder. And so the press had been working hand in hand with the police officers on this case. And the press had this idea that because there was a bunch of people that were trying to turn themselves in for the Black Dahlia, and they had this idea where they would say, oh, we've caught the Black Dahlia, and they'd think, oh, someone will turn themselves in. No, someone went and fucking killed another person, and they carved, fuck you, Black Dahlia, or BD, Black Dahlia, and on the next victim. And so basically that was caused by one of the press. Here we go. Kind of crazy, but I like it. So yes, here we are. All of this evidence is starting to pile up. And although there's evidence piling up, there's nothing that they can really do because they don't want to expose themselves for the murder that they had listened in on, and plus him leaving the country. And so they're left in a place where they kind of have to leave it. And yeah, so they go through a bunch of different theories. The years go by, and nothing really comes of it until Steve comes into the picture and starts making claims that his father had committed the murder of the Black Dahlia. And so many people were very convinced that this man was lying, and he just wanted to, you know, he had like a vendetta towards his dad. But there was lots of things that would imply that he was the killer. And so the thing that had really sealed the deal with the Black Dahlia supposedly was that she was going and doing some investigation in some of the murders that had happened across the country in Chicago. The red lipstick murders, they were all kind of really similar. Like the little girl, she had also been split in half. And so Elizabeth Short, she was really interested in this kind of stuff. And so she went back to go and investigate. And so at this point, they say that this is what had signed the death warrant for her and George. So she had come back to LA, and she was in fear of her life. And so she went down to San Diego to hide out. And she had stayed with this lady named Dorothy for about a month. And she said that this guy named Red comes to pick up little Miss Short. And so I guess he comes and gets her, and she's back in the city. And during this time, she supposedly was spotted for the last time at the Biltmore. She had a penchant for wearing black. She was a very classy woman, and she was waiting around for this guy. And I guess, you know, obviously passerbyers had noticed because she was a beautiful woman pacing around waiting. And so once she leaves this place, I guess this is the week where she had not been seen. So little Miss Elizabeth Short, she comes to LA. She's a little short on cash, and so she has to kind of do this thing where they call it dating for dinner. It was like basically a new guy a night, and have them take her out and they'd buy her dinner. She would not ever put out, not down for the D. She was also said to have been a prostitute, but that is incorrect. She was living with 7 prostitutes in this chancellor's apartment, the one that I've shown you photos of. And so she's just, you know, trying to make it, trying to star in some pictures and make a name for herself. And just things just go horribly wrong. I got this at Spirit, so I don't have a lot of faith in this color. My eyelashes are still not sticking. I put 3 coats on. Those sons of bitches. They lying. They lying. Okay, so I've got my lipstick on. I have my eyelashes halfway on. And Steve, he has a bunch of different people that are kind of critical and saying he's a liar. I went to Spirit and I got this stuff. I want to be the Black Dahlia. So I've got some liquid latex type material. This is not good. Okay, so I'm going to make her a little mouthy. How in the fuck are you supposed to get this shit out, man? Is it... It was only a couple dollars. That's good. Okay. How do I get it out? I guess I'll use a brush. This is so far off. Okay, so the Black Dahlia had been cut open on both sides, just like I'm doing, to make a little smile. A little snake. This stuff smells horrible. So Steve, he has some people coming to the house saying that they want to do some paranormal research. He is not about that because he doesn't want to be considered a joke, because the stuff that he's found is like really fucking concerning. His father could have been a murderer of the Black Dahlia. Pretty sure he's a murderer just in general, but the Black Dahlia, we're still not uncertain. No one really knows because the tests weren't really done. But first he turns him down, says, get the fuck out of here. I don't want that on this investigation. And then they say, oh, well, we'll bring in some cadaver dogs. And so we'll search the back of this Mayan house and around it. I'm trying to be real expressionless. Not working. And so these dogs go around. They're trained to only pick up on the scent of human remains. And so they start barking in the backyard. And so either way, that murder had been committed while they were bugging the house. So it could have been that one. But, you know, pretty interesting findings. There was a couple of murders, like I said before, the red lipstick murders that they were kind of thinking that he might have something to do with. They also thought maybe the Cleveland torso killers because they had cut them in half. So Steve's investigation goes on. He keeps finding more and more evidence that his father has something to do with it. There was also something that Steve had mentioned. He found writing on one of the bodies. So when the detective had kind of taunted the killer into trying to get him to confess by saying, oh, we caught the guy. Obviously they hadn't. They wanted to see if they would flinch and see if they would say, oh, hey, it was me. Apparently they killed another person and they wrote on her body, fuck you, DB, BD, Black Dahlia. There we go. And he noticed that the handwriting that this lady was, oh, that's pretty good blood color. This lady had on her skin, and it was his dad's handwriting. He could have sworn he had taken it to get it checked out by a professional. He had come back that it was basically pretty improbable that I was thinking, like, dude, this guy must have been upset about the people that he had hired to kind of corroborate his story. And they're all saying it's pretty improbable that it's him, but he thought that the O was slanted just the way that his dad had slanted his O's. But apparently they didn't see it, and there was a photograph that started this investigation. He had taken that to a professional, and she said it was 85% chance that it's not her. There was a couple of similarities, but it wasn't very likely. But either way, Steve, he still believes without a shadow of a doubt that it was his father. Super fucked up. I mean, he lived a very eccentric life, did some shitty shit, and I don't know. So Steve, he still believes that his dad is thoroughly the murderer of the Black Dahlia. And with the lifestyle like that, I would not doubt it. I have the feeling that, you know, Elizabeth, she likes to say no to men. She likes to get dinners and then say, fuck off. That's that. You don't get none. That's the kind of behavior that when a person like George doesn't get what he wants, they just go ahead and they take it. And with her investigating those other things that Steve had kind of guessed that his father was associated with, George had supposedly gotten scared that Elizabeth Short might actually crack the case, and so he had to just stop that in his tracks. Take this young girl, dismember the poor thing, do this to her, stuff shit in her mouth, friggin' just the worst stuff to her, cut her in half, drained all her blood, carved some shit on her hip and her face, and took her life. And here we are with the Black Dahlia. It's a real terrible ending to, could have been a really talented woman, and she had so much that she had to give, and yeah, that's the story of the Black Dahlia. I wanted to have this in my hair, but it's way too friggin' big. My eyelashes is still not working. Maybe I'll make this more bloody, too. Oh, I got this fucking eyelash. So I threw some blood on my face, and I feel way better now about that look. But yeah, it's starting to dry. I know that she didn't have any blood left in her little body, but you know, I just felt like it looked a little better. But yeah, I had so much fun doing this. Oh, I hate saying that because it's the murder I'm talking about, but I enjoyed myself thoroughly. And so next week, I am going to be talking about somebody very popular at this time, and I can't wait to tell you who it is. Just wait and see. But yeah, thanks for watching. Come back next week. Love you.